Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out what the future is for smart buildings, smarter buildings. Panelists are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you wonder who we are. And just a reminder that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on the Zoom chat. We'd like to see if we can get it as interactive as possible. And lastly, this slide deck is available on mondaylive.org in case you want any of the links or any of the stuff presented. This being October, this is the last day of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we've been talking about cybersecurity all this month, and this is it, one more. And our agenda, our normal chit chat, and then the main part of the hour, we're going to be talking about securing BACnet systems. And we have a couple of guests, Carol Lamonaco from JCI and Keith Corbett from Symmetrics. Hopefully we'll have some interesting discussions following that. But before we get into that, hand it over to Ken. What's going on in Ken World?
Ken World. Okay, well, I'd like to be the first to wish everybody online happy Halloween from Monday Live, and it's a chance to get out of your skin and basically Zoom from anywhere. There's been some interesting science fiction things I've been watching about dropping the iPhone in the casket and seeing some results of that. So anyway, it can happen anywhere, anytime, and this is your Monday Live. Automated buildings, we're happy with our new format. We're getting information out quicker. I'm a little worried that we've lost some of our traditional information, and I'm trying to figure out how to loop that back, but we're getting some new information and a lot of new folks, which is good. Hoping to try and pull the industry together. Really pleased to finally have our Atlanta AHR education sessions, have the program set out for that. There's a lot of to and froing, but I'm very pleased with the results of it. I think it's a great smattering of the industry of a lot of different opinions, and that is certainly the goal of the new format, is to try and get people to get their message out. And then once we get the messages all there, I think we can start joining them together with other articles and talk about the pros and cons of the various approaches. Anyway, the theme is turning chaos into creative change, and that's worked out really well. The actual building of this online has been really good. We have most of the folks that are actually involved in it are actually building that page and have access to that page. So as they get new speakers and stuff, not only daily but even hourly, you will see things popping on there. So we're trying to come with the times, and it's hard when you're an old man and you don't understand any of this stuff. So it's the other thing that we've done is we're starting to reassemble our contributing editors from the old site on the new site and get them featured, and we've linked back to the old site to all of their works. That's a great resource in itself. So I think you want to be part of that, and you want to update your connections best you can. And we have some new contributing editors, and we're always looking for more. So if you'd like to be a contributing editor, give me a call.
Great.
Back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. John.
Yeah, a couple. I missed all you guys for a few weeks due to travel. Our Skyposium event and Energy Exchange last week, but noticed a couple articles I thought were interesting to point out to all of us and our listeners. A return seeing in brick and mortar retail making a surprising impact. I think that's interesting to read. Some people would maybe like to actually go to a store and see the stuff before they buy it, right? So that's kind of interesting. And then, we've talked about the ESG trend and how it could create and hopefully will create positive impacts in improving the performance of buildings. But, there's the E, energy, environment, but there's also the S and G, and there's starting to be a pushback against the term ESG and policies around it. My personal concern is, the, if you will, kind of more tangible things that we are typically involved with around energy efficiency and operating buildings better might get swept up in that political pushback around ESG and policies that would help our industry and would help buildings be more efficient, might get lost in that conversation. So you might want to take a look at that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Mark.
Okay, couldn't remember what I did. Oh, this was interesting since data centers seems to be a key market segment that has always shown really good activity for technology, product solutions, and services that this group and the wider industry delivers. The fact that they are starting to feel the pinch a little bit, that you can see how the average cost from this article, they have increased by 15% and starting to experience the delays now in a lot of the ones that have been already earmarked to start and so forth and so on. So I just thought it was interesting that one of our key, more aggressive segments is really starting to experience this. And is this going to be the beginning of this going into other segments within the industry? Will we see the same for maybe airports, same for traditional office buildings, the same for new retail, so forth and so on? So just something to keep eyes on and see if in fact that is the case. So that's it.
Thank you, Mark. Gina.
So basically things are getting expensive, but it is interesting that you highlight those areas as key areas that you.
Cool. Thanks, Anto. So I just put this up here because I thought it was real interesting, and I've kind of been waiting to see where this would go. So this is one of the largest UK firms in UK, and what they're trying to do is cut back on travel to reduce their carbon footprint. And so what they're doing is they're levying kind of like a fine for attorneys that travel to meetings by plane. And they're not really fining the lawyers. They are actually taking it out of their travel budget. And then they're reporting it, or they're tracking breaches in the policy. And then they're taking that money and they're giving it towards a fund that will help support achieving their net zero emissions. I thought it was just kind of interesting because that's, in this industry, we all travel a lot. But we're seeing other industries that are saying, no, flying for business is an impact to the carbon footprint. The other thing, there was a little bit of an issue in the UK with some of the attorney firms or lawyer firms that were accusing others of greenwashing. So they were talking about how sustainable they were and how they were doing these things and how they were trying to be net zero and carbon neutral. But yet they pointed out that some of these firms actually had cases for fossil fuel clients, and that was increasing. So about 150 attorneys actually signed a pledge saying that, they were not going to greenwash, so to speak. So on this slide, I actually have 2 links to the information about what the UK firm is doing to curb travel, as well as the letter that they wrote for the greenwashing. So kind of interesting things. So a lot of this is getting a lot more pervasive. You're not seeing these cost cutting just in our industry, you're seeing it in others, and you're seeing a lot of people taking issue with what they call greenwashing. So just thought I'd share.
Great.
So
Just in
question,
some points
Gina.
there.
Mhm.
So here's my question. If you're fortunate enough to get bumped up on your flight, is that going to mean that you double the charge of 260 versus riding in coach?
Well, I don't think so. And Mark, I don't know if you've heard lately, but there's a lot of airlines, American is one of them, that's actually doing away with first class. So
I have. It's the traditional first class, but they still will have basically the larger seats, or I don't know, you may term it business class
mhm.
to some degree, or whatever the case is. But yeah, I have heard that.
So my question, oh, go ahead, finish your
I was
conversation.
going to say that I just flew back from Europe a couple of weeks ago, and I got this bamboo spoon on the plane, and it was so cool that I decided to keep it. But I contemplated during the entire flight how much energy the plane was using vis-a-vis how much this bamboo spoon was saving the environment. That's great.
Carbon offset. Well, my question to you guys is, are you seeing a lot of other companies cut back on travel and said, okay, use Zoom? Are you guys seeing that outside of COVID? We're outside of COVID now. So are you guys seeing that? Are you predicting that's going to be pervasive?
I not only see it, I actually think, now, look, I was just a Skyposium, and it was amazing to be with the people. We've trained people to get a sales visit like this. There's pros and cons to it, man.
But
I
Gina,
think-
I think where I'm seeing it, as far as it's not because of what you just said, it's the cost. Plain and simple, it's cost driven. So for example, I'm heading out to Vegas tomorrow morning, and I could fly from Richmond to Vegas, $400, $450, give or take,
Mhm.
a little bit here or there. $1,180 round trip.
Whoa.
Crazy, it's crazy. Yeah, Mark, I agree with you. I was going to say we're hearing resistance to travel, but it's not for any egalitarian or sustainability reason. It's the prices are crazy and the schedule is crazy. Last week for Energy Exchange, we chose to drive 8.5 hours rather than pay the crazy fees, but also be subject to an absolutely horrible schedule, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the other,
just
thing, the other thing that's changed is as well is all the training courses where people used to travel to training courses there. Then everybody's doing online training now instead, which kind of suits them. I mean, I know it's tougher, but most companies during COVID switched between having to go somewhere for your training to actually doing it online.
Okay, let's move on, shall we? That's interesting, and also the cost in time.
Yeah.
Over having a Zoom meeting, we haven't talked about. So thank you for that pumpkin, Gina. I was looking at these two articles over the weekend. The one on the left is actually quite interesting. What the New York Times did is they actually went to 10 different towns, some small, some large, and really just sort of did an analysis, almost like a social analysis of how things have changed in the last 2-3 years through COVID and the other side. And it's interesting, big towns, big cities and small towns as well, as small as like 2,000-3,000 people. So just kind of an interesting, a lot of pictures trying to sort of show how sometimes some towns are thriving and others are not, and it's just a difference. And so that's interesting. And the one on the right here is the battle that's about to that we see on online, which is really sort of building the new type of social network, social internet, whatever you want to call it. This is Blue Sky, which was founded by Jack Dorsey, who's obviously no longer at Twitter now. So I just thought that's sort of interesting because it'd be an interesting area of technology, but also how we connect with each other through online. So anyway, those are the two. Any other thoughts before we move? Hearing none. So cybersecurity is the month. We've dealt with managing cybersecurity, talking about different new perspectives, talking about zero trust and dynamic systems last week. And so this week we're going to be talking about managing BACnet systems. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Lee to start this a little presentation that they've put together, and I'll bring on the two guests. Over to you, Jim.
Sounds great, Anto. Thanks. So, a lot of you have some familiarity with this content. Others might not have heard about it. But as an industry, we've been working on cybersecurity for more than 15 years. So I've got a little timeline here that shows what we've been doing in the industry and in the BACnet committee, starting with, original heating and air conditioning, mechanical systems, that mechanical controls giving way to pneumatic controls, the direct digital control revolution starting in 1983, and then the development of BACnet, which came in 1995. I'd like to point out that really BACnet grew up before the internet. And it was designed starting in 1987. And the world hadn't even decided that TCP/IP was the final winner for lower level networking. So in 1999, it was very clear that the internet was growing and becoming very dominant. So BACnet introduced BACnet IP, which is BACnet running over UDP/IP networks, providing reliability in that networking and the application layer all the way up, and supporting at that point 5 different physical layers that BACnet could run on. For those of you who are not that familiar with BACnet, it has a series of application data definitions and default behaviors, which comprise the top, and it uses a series of different networking technologies below. At that time, it was pretty clear that cybersecurity was not that much of an issue, but where it was, people started using virtual private networks and VLANs to secure those networks. And by 2004, the BACnet committee was working on a proposal called Addendum G, which was a security technology designed by the best and brightest minds of our industry to secure BACnet from top to bottom. When that was done, at my company, we decided that we were definitely not going to implement it and that it was dead on arrival, because we felt that existing IT networks, the IT community was moving much faster with much more innovation. And by the time we got Addendum G into products, it would be wildly obsolete. So around 2009, we began working with Cisco to develop the next generation of BACnet running on IT networks. And Jim Butler, our CTO, stood up the BACnet IT working group under the auspices of the ASHRAE BACnet committee. And we were going to quickly push through the new technology. And you can see quick in ASHRAE terms ended up being 10 years. So BACnet IT was renamed BACnet Secure Connect and released in 2019. However, there were a number of key pieces that just to get that standard out that got left on the cutting room floor. So by 2020, we decided to quickly convene a group of experts under the auspices of something called the Secured by Symmetrics consensus process to effectively fill in those holes and make sure that we could go from BACnet to BACnet SC to a future BACnet, which would be interoperable. So a lot of the interoperability pieces weren't defined properly, and now we've done that. So over the last 2 years, we spent working with this committee, both a marketing committee and a technical committee, to come up with a new standard. And it's not really a standard. We're calling it a manufacturer's guideline for now. And there's some other documents that are coming out. Next slide, please, Anto. So the SBC consensus building process ran its course. These experts got together and basically made these decisions on how to make the security interoperable. Next slide. So here's a list of all of the participants. I think you can see that we have a very broad and round group of some of the best security architects from the industry, and certain people that are frequently on this call. Steve Jones, Steve Fay participated at the beginning. So a lot of people put their imprint on this standard, and now it is coming to fruition. Next slide, please. So right now we're in a particularly interesting situation in that this standard has been published as of a month ago and is beginning to circulate. But the question is what is it? The answer a long time ago is we decided that this needed to be a piece of standards or specification. Let's not even use those words, special publication owned by ASHRAE. So we registered a trademark called Managed BACnet, gave that trademark to ASHRAE, and we've been working to have a committee under the auspices of the a special interdisciplinary task group on cybersecurity within ASHRAE that basically owns this document. And we're hoping to get this approved for ASHRAE publication by around AHR 2020. So the consensus building process includes both marketing and technical. We started it at Symmetrics, but it's really an open public document with no copyright, which has been distributed broadly. The key thing here is that I am not allowed to use the term Managed BACnet publicly in any of this promotion. So I apologize that all of the references to this same document and technology in this PowerPoint all say SBC or secured by Symmetrics, but you can use your imagination in the future as to where this standard will go. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn it over to Keith Corbett. Keith, would you like to do the next several slides?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So one of the key learnings out of the consensus building technical process is that in the future, everyone's going to be a cybersecurity expert. There's no getting away from that. And so in the context of the Monday Live view of the world, it means that there's building systems need to enable network and cybersecurity operations as well, and not just as a silo, but as in some cases very tightly integrated with IT security operations centers, network operations centers, depending on how big or how small the institution is. Well, to support smart network and cybersecurity operations, a lot of responsibility then needs to be pushed all the way down into the systems level. And there has to be interoperable network and cybersecurity management in the end devices so that they can participate in multi-vendor networks, in complicated systems, and whether or not IT is around, whether or not there's even anyone on site. So that was a key learning. That's a change that in the past, network and cybersecurity features would have been proprietary in a vendor's system if the markets they sold to had those needs. Next slide. And so to frame the discussion of the guidelines, we're really focusing on interoperability, but there's a need to have a larger framework of architecture to show where the interoperable functions live, and then also how they can enable smarter applications. And so in particular, the management functionalities that are on-prem are assigned to a local manager that is responsible for the network and security capabilities of the system. This could be built into a control system product, a server on site, or it could be a standalone device. Some of the functions could be split in a given system between different vendors. But the whole goal is really to deal with those managed devices that with BACnet SC, they are taking on more responsibility for encrypting traffic, authorizing who talks to them at the TLS level, and they need to be, the diagnostics are harder. They need to have more features that can be shared interoperably in the building. So the managed BACnet devices, there we have recommendations on what they should support. And as well, BACnet is not the only protocol in the building that, in particular, when data is being pulled from other systems through BACnet on its way up the smarter stack, there's requirements on gateways to other protocols. And as well, there's an opportunity for using network segmentation best practices from, say, the ISA body of standards, the 62443 set of standards, to define secure conduits between the BACnet SC system and existing non-BACnet SC BACnet networks. So that managed firewall router is, again, the set of responsibilities, best practices for connecting to non-BACnet SC systems. And of course, the blue link off to the left where it says ITO CISO management, that's part of the part of the reality, particularly in big organizations where there's a need for taking information out of the BAS system and getting it into a SIM tool, or in many cases, IT may be in charge of certificate provisioning on a site. And so the building automation system, if it's going to be managing certificates for the small devices, it also needs to look upwards to IT to enable certificate provisioning. And part of the reason there isn't a spider web of lines from all the managed BACnet devices to IT, although that does happen, is just to highlight the point that as Jim likes to say, the local network and security manager is an impedance matcher between the 2-year time scale of change for IT technologies and the 20-year time scale of change for the building systems. And of course, as is part of the smarter stack paradigm, data can be provided outside of the building for smarter applications to building owners, and in the same way, the cybersecurity, in particular, management operations, it can be aggregated in the cloud. If you're a large organization and you have a vulnerability patching policy, the local network and security manager can be monitoring the system to see what the state of affairs is in the controllers in a building, but you really want to turn that into enterprise knowledge at a global level. And to the extent that, again, that there are need for multiple vendors to participate into a given organization's data flow, the idea is that there's responsibilities that are in the cloud, and this is consistent with some of the higher levels in the smarter stack. Next slide. So this is just a taste of some of the functionality that needs to be managed. Some of this is using BACnet. Some of it may actually be using IT protocols. And in many cases, the goal here is to enable the owner to put in place processes to achieve their cybersecurity goals. the green box down at the bottom is then also looking to the future, that managed BACnet, or what will become of managed BACnet, hopefully, is an ongoing top-down industry process to guide the development of BACnet systems to continue to push responsibility into the devices and to evolve. There's a lot of things that are being managed, and so I don't know. Anto, is the next slide the map onto the smarter stack? I just wanted to point out as well is that this is not being developed in a vacuum, that the same sort of recommendations that this group has identified as needs for cybersecurity at multiple levels in a building system, these are all things that are in scope for these interoperable network and cybersecurity functions. And as with the applications that are using data out of buildings in the smarter stack, there is a need for enabling technologies all at several layers to come up with a complete solution. Next slide. Well, so that's basically what I wanted to deal with. The next two slides are just technical details of an example of how, in addition to perimeter security, remote access solutions, and applications above the building automation system, that there's a need to put cybersecurity features and management features down inside the network. So this is an example of network segmentation within the BACnet system itself, but to be part of a fuller, smarter solution. There's high-level applications that are understanding the policies that are in place for the site, and then also data from alarms is also going up the stack to IT and to building applications as well. So Jim Lee, I don't want to get down in the weeds. I'd love to, but
Anto, back us up one, and I'm going to turn it over to Carol. So Carol Lamonaco from Johnson Controls has been a long-term participant, wrote a chapter in this guideline. Carol, would you like to make it whatever comments you'd like about this suite of technology?
Yes, thanks, Jim. So you can see, just looking at the operations line, the row, there's a lot of things that exist today, but we as a group really looked at these items and said, hey, for a smart, secure building, you've got to have these. The newest one is islanding. And what it means is if you know that your controller knows, it can detect if someone's maybe pounding the heck out of the Ethernet ports and trying to prevent you from doing whatever you should be doing, like maybe sending some trend data to the workstation or to the cloud, whatever. It'll allow the device to operate, but it'll turn off those Ethernet ports and kind of watch for maybe when the attack goes away. So you can see that that's kind of a smart. We don't have that today in our commercial controllers. You might find a few industrial controllers that'll do that. The other thing is the next gen firewalls. That's in the application role. That's pretty cool. And again, kind of like application, where you don't want to transfer that data on a BACnet IP network over to BACnet SC, because you just don't know where it came from and if you can trust it. So it's kind of what Keith depicted in that one slide that he just showed. So all in all, you can kind of look at the things that we've added, especially the things that are circled. We believe this will make your building safer and definitely smarter from a security point of view. Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to do is, Keith, why don't you present the last slide on certificates and just talk about certificates generally? because it's a very important topic as to, so
Sure.
just as a generality, every device, every controller is going to have a certificate in this architecture. So once we get authorization taken care of in the BACnet committee, this is going to lead to basically zero trust networking all the way from the bottom of the system to the top for anything that is using BACnet SC and this new secured by symmetrics technology. So Keith?
Yeah, so and people are familiar with certificates, particularly it's the magic technology that makes the lock appear at the top of your browser when you go to your banking site. But it's a way to check that the security private key that the device you're talking to is using is actually from the site you think you're going to, that you weren't redirected in the middle. Well, in building automation systems, TLS, encryption, private keys, and certificates are used in a wide variety of contexts. That you might use them for multiple protocols to the secure version of the protocol. And in BACnet, every device is a server. And so every device needs to be like that bank and prove that it is who it says it is and has permission to be on the network. But the other attribute of building systems is, particularly in smaller buildings, they are possibly isolated from the internet and unattended. And so there isn't the same sort of possibility of using the global private key infrastructure for validating a VAV box. And so the BACnet uses a two-layer system that every device gets a BACnet certificate, but they also get a copy of the certificate of the key that directly signed everyone. So that when someone approaches them out of the blue, which is possible in BACnet SC, you can directly connect to devices for performance purposes. They challenge their peer that both the client and the server both need to prove their identity, and essentially they're proving that they were both received certificates from the same source, controlled by the owner. And but you can imagine that in a multi-vendor environment, bootstrapping, during onboarding, during commissioning of the system, and making sure that you're talking to the right device if you're using online mechanisms for distributing certificates, that it can be a complicated process. And so the goal of the certificate management recommendations in the manufacturer guideline document is to make it easier for the local management to keep the devices in the green boxes, get them into the green boxes, leave them in the green boxes, and never get to the pink boxes, which are failure modes, which require you to recover, start from scratch. There's a gap in standards between the BACnet standard, which really is about what's on the wire and protocol, and say ISA 62443 family of standards, which are describe general capabilities of systems, devices, and owner processes. And a good example of where the manufacturer's guidelines try to fill in that gap is that purple box at the bottom, device disposal. And in fact, Carol, you might want to chime in with some of the best practices that are needed for the industry and that Johnson was aware of, but we wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of.
Okay, sure. A lot of the military sites have been for years. Make sure that you wipe or swipe clean the device. So if you had a military, say, pretty sensitive installation and your controller was not functioning properly or wasn't functioning at all, they would insist that when you take that off their property and replace a new one, that the old failed device would get wiped clean so that it could be repaired or so forth. They didn't want their IP addresses. They didn't want, in some case, the user accounts in there, even though they might have been a little cryptic. The user accounts, they still didn't want that going somewhere, or possibly in a dumpster for someone to go later and pile through. So they impose these kind of standards for wiping the disks. When it's a workstation, then they would assume or allow the local IT department to dispose of it or take care of it. Most of them are virtualized. So yeah, this is very applicable for today and has been for the last, I'd say, 5 years or more.
Yeah, so I just point that out as an example of something where the large controls companies that are used to selling into secure environments have this capability in their product lines, but a small third-party provider of, say, interfaces to flow meters or power meters might not be aware of this requirement. And so, again, the idea is to get best practices throughout the industry so that owners can operate their buildings for the entire life cycle using the processes that they want. And it's not just about bits on the wire. There's a whole suite of I guess wisdom that is in the industry that we're hoping to bake into people's BACnet SC products.
Great. All right. Anto, could you back us up to the what's being managed slide for a minute? Good. So what I'd like to do is basically say that if you look at this suite of technology that's been generated and where it's going, a lot of these are standards that will be built into every manufacturer's product. And although it's a complex situation, a lot of this will be handled automatically. I mean, many of the things that we've done for years are very complex. The part of the industry that actually needs the most help here is the policies and procedures as to how we will run these networks. So an example would be backup and restore. If you're going to back up and restore your own products, if you're a manufacturer, that's one thing. If you now have to back up and restore your competitor's product, it's quite another. So all of these things have been contemplated. They're being built in. Pieces are being added to the BACnet standard all the time. But we're looking at a trajectory of a few years for this technology to be built into products across the industry. What I'd like to do is see if we can entertain questions from the audience or anyone else, answer any questions they may have on this. So questions?
There are a couple of questions. The latest one from Pete. Does this SPC architecture require certificate authority outside of the building? To sort of explain that. Where the CA.
Yeah, and in fact, there are a couple of models that we call out in the manufacturer's guide. The BACnet standard itself is agnostic because of the fact that everyone gets the signing certificate as well as their certificate, and that's as far as they check. But it is possible that particularly for other protocols for web servers that are part of the BAS system, that the certificates that they use could be linked into the global PKI infrastructure. What is more common, I think, in high security environments is that the local IT department will act as the certificate authority, and they will either do the signing directly, but the chain of certificates is within their management infrastructure. But yeah, the key thing is that every device needs to be configured with what it needs to know to run without going outside the building. And we're quite clear that there's a a right to sign and a right to migrate for the building owner, so that they are the ones that own the capability to sign, and they can't be held hostage by a vendor. Carol, did you want to color on that?
You did. Yeah, good.
Yeah, sure. So in my experience, just test citing all the BACnet SC, talking with different IT groups, I think it wasn't a problem that, BACnet SC required a certificate. The issue that came up the most is they're requiring the ECC types rather than the RSA. But once these IT departments understood that and what they needed to send back, the signing key, for example, copy of the signing certificate, then I think they understood it well, and it was a piece of cake after that. Although the automatic, so imagine if you had, I don't know, 200, 300 controllers and a workstation or several workstations that needed this certificate, you could imagine how that would be pretty rough if someone just had a manual tool and, had to go visit devices. And so they did say that, oh yeah, we do need a algorithm so that on a site that somebody would manage these certificates to automatically renew the certificates. And so that was, they picked up on that right away. Now, there are a number of buildings where there's not an active IT department, or they just don't want to mess with it. And so there are provisions out there where some manufacturers sell, a CA and certificates through another well-known certificate provider, just so that there's that, because when you got to boot up the system, you need those certificates if you're going to run BACnet SC. So anyway, so we've kind of looked at all those, and it was surprising, but yet after we got over the discussions and gave them the samples, everything was fine. It was accepted. So I think this will be accepted pretty well by our community and by the IT departments.
So Bill, you made a comment earlier. Do you want to expand on that, or ask a question? Not quite sure. You're muted.
Jim, I appreciate the way you guys laid this out. Thoughtful. I can't imagine the complexity you guys have had to deal with in the past 10 years putting all this together. So great job, man.
Thank you, Bill. So I think that I saw Bill's comment stream by, and yes, there's a lot of complexity under the hood here. A lot of it is built into people's products. More of it will be built into people's products overall. But there's a fundamental truth with cybersecurity, which is that it's complicated. And a lot of the complexity is actually not necessarily with the technology. It's the people and process that go around it. And we're really on some new ground here in terms of how people are actually going to run this and who's responsible for it. So we had a thesis going into this that ultimately that the IT department would own responsibility for cybersecurity for building automation systems. So what we did is we tried to create an architecture which would give the IT department the things that they normally expect from networks, while trying to shield them from some of the complexity that takes place in the OT networks that we use. Carol, I'm wondering if you could opine on the relationship between IT and building automation and how we came about some of those thoughts.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in some buildings, the IT guys do not even talk, don't even want to talk with the building facility guys. But in the majority of the cases, I'd say over the last 5 to 10 years, we're seeing that marriage, or, there's a demand by higher ups because they realize that we just can't, ignore building automation. You've seen all the Target and, Fazio Mechanical, all those incidents in the papers, and, we can't not live, so you cannot just ignore. You got to work together. And we've seen that at higher government groups that are doing a wonderful job, like GSA. They're doing a wonderful job managing cyber and policies. Other corporations, very good job. So I think we are seeing this, that people can't, these two departments, facilities and IT can work together. And it's a little bumpy at first, but once they understand what you implemented or what's implemented in the BACnet SC spec, I think they understand it, and you know they appreciate the increased security.
Questions from the panel?
I was going to ask, do you see, just building on that, Carol, do you see as they get more adoption into it with the IT guy, do you think they'll end up being able to help and advise and set standards into RFPs and specifications that seems to be lacking these days?
Yes and no. I mean, they won't care too much about the smaller controllers, the BACnet building controllers or the ASC type of devices. They do care about, you know, the workstation, the server. Yeah. So they will be open to that. And I just think it'll take time. But once we adopt some of those other things like authentication, and like automatic way to renew the certificates, I think it'll be better. Will it be perfect? No. I think there'll always be some things that they don't care about. They'll just like, I don't care about those little controllers. Yeah.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So, well, actually two, but start with the first one. So I'm a little unclear on the ownership of driving this forward. And I don't mean the IP ownership. I mean, it sounds like the effort was started by an industry consortium, but it's now with ASHRAE. Does that mean it's part of the BACnet spec or will be part of the BACnet spec? Can you help clarify that for me?
Absolutely. So some of the components will be part of the BACnet spec. In fact, if we'll get you a copy of the document, John, you'll see that there are certain areas that are called out, which are creating direct innovation in the BACnet spec. One example of that would be a common certificate format, so that there's an electronic exchange of certificates so that everyone didn't do it their own way.
Okay.
So there are other examples cited as well. But primarily, as Symmetric started this, we started it to end it. And the handoff is really to BACnet International. So we've handed the publication ownership off to ASHRAE because they do that well. And they also have the ability to have outside reviewers. We are distributing the document now with no copyright so that anyone can use it to get the jump on things.
Yeah.
But our hope is that we can get ASHRAE to approve that as soon as possible. And then it will be out there. And BACnet International will continue on with the maintenance, and other industry groups might continue to help BACnet International innovate on the standards and testing and everything else around it. Everything in the BACnet ecosystem should be able to be supportive of what we're doing.
Okay, thanks.
How about, this is Mark, Jim, how about some of these newer, I guess they're not so new anymore, certification like Wired Score and all these other Spire that have, you know, starting to make a little noise here. Do you have plans, or has there been any thought where we need to get the BACnet SC initiatives into those types of ratings or review type certifications?
I have to say, Mark, that we have not been focusing on those scores, but we have been focusing on traditional elements of the consulting community and others to try to build some support there. But I think that's an excellent idea that in future we will consider what kind of outreach we'll do.
So Jim, Matt just asked a question about skill gap in contractors and to install and configure. Can you speak to what's going on that front to try and close that gap?
Yes, I think that for one, Melissa Boutwell, who runs a training company that has support from the Department of Labor and others, is kicking off a big cybersecurity training effort for our industry. And stay tuned at ASHRAE and other points to see what she's developing. She's developing accredited training courses, which are going to be held and are working with many different groups in the industry. So we realize there's a huge skills gap. But I'd love to turn it over to Carol because she's been grappling, for the last 10 years with how to educate a large channel on cybersecurity. So Carol, can you tell us about how that works? And
Sure. So I get all kinds of calls, from technicians to sometimes consulting engineers. And it's mainly, I think at first centered around major DoD requirements and other government like FEMA, not FEMA, but FISMA. And it's, so anyway, there's the NIST Special Publication 853 Rev 4 and 5. Anyway, so once you explain and get over some of the nomenclature, these guys pick it up very fast. So in cybersecurity land, the requirements are called information assurances, and so they're requirements, right? So once you explain it, I've had consultant engineers from big groups, the lights come on. Oh, that's what they mean, Carol, And the same thing with contractors doing, doing an installation that, required NIST and certain cybersecurity specifications. They couldn't get over why are they taking an inventory? What's an inventory? Well, an inventory is just a list of the products they're going to make up the system. And then, they ask for different, is it run, on the Ethernet, what MSTP, and they'll ask pertinent questions, and that'll give them an idea. Hey, if this is a IP device or some lower level on, RS-45. So once you get over that and explain it, that's the key thing, is to get these groups educated and what they have to understand what their piece of the pie is all about. And then what happens, like one of the guys goes, not let me install with wireless. I save all kinds of money with wireless. Well, now on some of the military sites, they do let you apply for a permit in the interim, to get the things installed when there's nobody around, just see the guards or whatever. They will let you do that, but running, real time, they don't want any wireless, they want everything wired and so forth. So those are the kind of things that help people understand, and it'll give them a jump to understand what we mean by the cybersecurity stuff. So it's not bad, really.
I'd like to thank Carol and Keith Corbett for joining us. I think we've run out the clock. So Anto, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Carol, Keith. It's been great. Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. Anybody want to wrap this up? No volunteers?
I have a quick comment that I made in the statement. I think it was a great use of the smarter stack. That was really, really helpful. That kind of put a lot of context for me. So that was useful, very useful.
Good.
I think it's also great that the industry drove this rather than the other way around. The fact that Jim and the rest of the companies actually got in and kind of created this, and now pushing it back up to the standards people. You'd like to think also they could be doing some similar stuff too, the other way around.
And we tried to take an IT route and create the standard first, and then push it back up to the committees.
Okay, so with that, let's wrap this. Thanks again. Thanks for the audience for being here. We'll get a video of this on YouTube tomorrow or thereabouts. Otherwise, have a great week. Be safe tonight if you're going out trick-or-treating, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.